Hey, Navigator Nation, welcome into the Wednesday edition of COPD Navigator House Call. My name is Mike Hess. I am the COPD dude. I am a respiratory therapist of some years now. I am a COPD advocate. I am a COPD educator. Do a lot of stuff for the COPD community. But one of the things I'm most proud of is, of course, our work here with COPD Navigator discussion group on Facebook and our various media channels on Twitter and on YouTube. Very much appreciate the support and dedication of all the people working on behalf of COPD in these settings. That has made an incredible impact on me and hopefully on fellow members of the COPD community. We had a really cool event last night. We're working on working the bugs out of using video conferencing to do virtual support groups. Monday night we had a Harmonicas for Health group that went really well. And we might hum a few bars today too. Traditionally we do harmonicas on the Wednesday show. We'll see how that goes. What else? Last night we had a really good discussion about some non-medicinal, non-inhaler, non-pharmacological interventions that we can do to help with COPD. I'm seeing my reflection in the screen here. It's a nice day outside. I was just out getting some steps in, enjoying some of the nice weather. Not sure how much longer I'm going to be able to do that during the daytime. Looks like I'm going to be back to work pretty quick here, at least for some of the daytime hours. So I was glad I was able to get that in while you can. Of course, exercise was a big topic last night in the Ready Room because, in the words of the great Jean Ramos, a person living with COPD herself, who travels around the country, continues to be very, very active. Does a lot with a lot of different support groups and everything. She uses the inhalers in order to breathe, in order to exercise, and then the exercise helps her to live. So, really we often in medicine look at giving somebody an inhaler, giving somebody a medication, because that's something we can do. That's something we as a clinician can actively do. And there's a certain kind of cognitive bias that tells us that usually leads everybody, not just clinicians, but usually leads everybody to believe that doing something is better than doing nothing. And so if we can do a thing, we want to do that thing. So we want to give the inhaler. We want to refer for a procedure. We want to do all that stuff. Even though sometimes that's not necessarily the thing to do. Sometimes the thing to do is to coach, to encourage, to support, to provide a safe place to vent, to, be honest and get stuff off your chest and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I've always wanted with Navigator. And that's what I hope will continue on in whatever format the live shows continue on with. On whatever format our discussion groups carry on with. I think that's a really important thing to do, that I think we need to get a lot of, for lack of a better term, clinician and patient. I try to avoid the word patient as much as I can, just because it is a little bit depersonalizing. But when we're looking at, as I sometimes like to say, both sides of the stethoscope, I do think it's important to get everybody talking a little bit more together. We often have these groups where everybody's kind of separated and we try to figure out what we're going to do on behalf of the community. And we really need to be learning what to do. Kim, sorry you couldn't find the link. Are you following the COPD Navigator page? We've changed the name of the group to COPD Navigator discussion group on Facebook. And there's also the lighthouse icon shows up for the page. The event links are all there. I'm going to try and make sure that they're also in the group, and you can always message me if you want to get involved there. But we're going to be doing these things at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I think we're going to stick with harmonicas on Monday for now. And then Tuesdays seem to do pretty well for the Ready Room, so we might stick with that. And then this Thursday, we've got one coming up where we're going to try and play some games together. Joe was there asking where everybody was last night. Missed a good one. Thanks for stopping by, Joe, and thank you for sharing your stories and stuff. I learned a really cool thing last night from Joe about, we talk about, on the clinical side of things, we often talk about how severe things are. We talk about severity staging and stage 1, and hopefully we don't talk about end stage too much anymore, but we talk about all these staging guidelines and everything else. And Joe had a really good way to look at how no, the name change was good, John. Name change was good. That was a good thing. I think it's good. I think that does help clarify things, because when we talk about COPD Navigator, we got to know where to look, whether it's in the page or the discussion group, and Facebook doesn't always make it easy. So, but in any event, Joe was talking about how he was judging how severe his COPD was getting by the number of Kleenex boxes or tissue boxes that he was having around the house, because the worse it got, the more closer he would want it to him, so that he wasn't coughing and hacking everything everywhere. So, and I thought that was ingenious. I thought that was a really good way to communicate how severe things are getting. So I don't know if we want to call it the tissue factor or what we want to call it, but I think that's a good, independent, communicable way to look at how serious respiratory stuff is getting. So also learned a great tip from Brian Simpson, one of our patrons on patreon.com. I really appreciate his support. And if you also want to support and bring back the daily lives, head us up in patreon.com/bestnest. But Brian's suggestion, or his comment, was, for those of you who don't know, Brian has been living with chronic respiratory stuff for a very long time. He was mentioning he's essentially been end stage since he was about 16 or 18, I think he said. That it's important to know your number when it comes to like FEV1 and things like that, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. We need that for diagnosis. But you need to tell your number. You don't let your number tell you who you are. We had a really good discussion about when somebody says your FEV1 is 18%, what does that mean? Well, what's the relevance of that? And those are things I want to get into in more detail, as I hopefully am still able to put together some educational videos and things like that. Also, if anybody knows where we can get some grants or something like that, that would be helpful. But what I want to do is clear up that communication. We in medicine, and I know I probably throw a mention of this out there in just about every show, every day. We in medicine do a terrible, terrible job at communicating stuff to the people in our care. In this case, we're talking about FEV1, where a lot of people assume that it's like a gas tank. It's either full or it's empty. So you have you assume that maybe you're 100% when you're in your prime, and you slowly whittle your way down until you're, 50% or 30%. And it's important to remember that that's not relative to the maximum. It's relative to what we would predict for somebody. And that doesn't always, it doesn't always translate well. And I want, if I have a legacy, I want it to be that I worked hard to clear up a lot of this confusion and to make healthcare in general start talking to people a little bit more effectively. John says, going back to the ABG or the tissue factor, sure beats an ABG. And yeah, I'll say, no poking around on that. No stabby stab or anything like that. Just counting those tissue boxes. All right, so what is on your mind today? This is a great day for independent questions. As I said, this is increasingly looking like the last week for the daily live show. So if you like this programming, take advantage of it while you can. We'll still be doing the nightly or the evening Zoom groups, the Ready Room. Still looking forward to those. Those have been a lot of fun. Hopefully, those will be able to continue fairly regularly and indefinitely. And I definitely want to continue doing some kind of live show in the afternoon at some point. We were able to do the before we had the house call, we had Breathe TV. I think we're going to end up sticking with the house call moniker, but definitely want to do something, whether it's weekly or whatever that is, in addition to some of the Zoom stuff. I think that would be of great benefit to a lot of people. And frankly, I like doing it. I want to continue doing it. So looking for ways to make that happen. As I mentioned, I was just outside. That's why I'm a little disheveled right now, and also got the news about resuming normal work operations while I was out there. So I didn't really have time to get a lot of stuff going. Wearing my working all together to end COPD. I'm going to be putting a version of this up on our Navigator shop as well. I was pretty proud of this design. Kind of based on some of the things we saw coming out of Gold last year. Kind of the idea, of course, came from Gold last year. That was the theme of last year's World COPD Day in November. All together to end COPD. Better treatments, better therapies, better prevention, better understanding, better early diagnosis, all the things that we want to talk about with the COPD National Action Plan. Modified the logo a little bit. Actually, I made the lungs myself. I made it myself. But yeah, I was proud of this design. I really like this design, and nice t-shirts through Sparkbird Print and Design too. That was really helpful. They help us with our lungs go marching in, the Fleur de Lung that we had for our respiratory conference in New Orleans last year. While we're trying to figure out what else we want to talk about today, let me see. I'm pulling up. Take a quick spin through. Well, you know what we'll do? We'll talk about some harmonicas, because that's good news. We're going to keep that going. So let me pull up real quick here. Shar joining in from Canada, land that I love. Wait, that's God Bless America. I've been to enough hockey games. I should at least know a couple of the lyrics to "Oh Canada." All right, so I will have a harmonica thing in a minute. Although I do see that Kim has a question that came up, like I said, in the Ready Room last night. Just gonna get that ready for when we get to that point. All right, so when we're talking about pulmonary function testing, whether it's usually spirometry or diffusion capacity, we talk about percentages. And so you'll see there are two percentages that you really need to worry about. Well, three, I guess. We measure. So when we do spirometry, let me back up a second. For those of you, hopefully everybody's had spirometry done, but just so that everybody knows what I'm talking about. Where did I put? Oh, here it is. Here's our device. Spirometry is the thing where you're blowing through the tube, where you take that, where you take that deep breath in, and you go, keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blowing. That's spirometry. And John, I can always count on John for the good song lyrics there. "Oh Canada, my home and native land." Thank you, John. So when you blow through that tube, we get a value of what your lungs do. We get a value of how much your lungs have moved in, first off, the first second of the forced exhalation. We call that the forced expiratory volume in 1 second, or FEV1. And then we have the whole breath. the forced vital capacity. We take both of those values and we compare them to other data sets. We have been doing research on pulmonary function for roughly the last 30 years or so. And I don't know that there's a definitive time frame for it, probably whenever anybody gets the itch. We update those standards based on demographic values. We've got, we used to use a thing called NHANES, which was a National Health Assessment, that was NHANES 3, U.S. study that was done going on, I think, 20 years ago now. More recently, newer spirometers will use a data set called from the Global Lung Initiative, where it's a little bit more broad, and so we can look at a lot of these other factors. What these data comprise are expected values for a person's lung function values based on your age, your height, your biological sex, and your ethnicity. There's some debate about how much ethnicity plays a role, but plays a role as opposed to, we all know that there are certain groups that may be on average taller, maybe on average shorter, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't always know that ethnicity plays a super big role in it, but that's the characteristic we use. So we have these 4 different criteria, and we've looked at all of these data sets for people who fall into all these categories. And based on that, when I put your characteristics in the computer, it gives me a prediction based on your stuff. So if you are a 60-year-old woman who is 5'6" tall and Caucasian, I can look on a table and I can say, okay, your FEV1 should be X number of milliliters. Your FVC should be X number of milliliters. And so then what I do, or more accurately what the computer does, is it takes that value that you did and compares it to what you should have done, what we would have predicted you do if you had perfectly normal lungs just walking in off the street. And that is what the percentage is. So if your predicted FEV1 is 1,000 milliliters, 1 liter, and you blow out 680 milliliters, that is 68% of the predicted value. It does not, where the confusion comes in is we have a tendency in healthcare to try to simplify and Michael Nybert checking in, reproducibility key. Yes, absolutely. Should do more than one spirometry test, but that was just an example. Knudsen is another data set. Yes. So we will often tell somebody, okay, your FEV1 is 68%, continuing on with that. So your lung function is 68%. And while that is kind of true, it's really easy to misinterpret. That one particular function is 68% of what we would predict, not 68% of your personal best, not 68% of your all-time best or the universe's best or anything like that, but 68% of what we would predict. Now, usually that means that there's something not good going on. Okay. So we know that that can be a marker of some kind of process, but we also need to look at all the other stuff going on. We need to look at your forced vital capacity and that the whole breath of air that moves out. And then we compare, is that what it should be compared to your predicted value? Because if your FEV1 is 68% of predicted, and for example, your FVC is 100% of what's predicted, we compare your absolute values together and we'll probably find some kind of obstruction. Probably. It's a different ratio, but we'll probably find it. But if your FEV1 is 68% of predicted and your FVC is 68% of predicted, that tells us that one of two things could be going on. Either we didn't do a very good job coaching you and you didn't give us your maximal effort and the computer thinks your lungs are small, or you may have some other process that is preventing your lungs from expanding properly. Maybe rib problems or diaphragm problems or muscle problems, whatever it is. And that puts us in a whole other direction. So it's really important for us to, from the clinical side of things, to be very clear that when we're giving percentages and when we're talking about all that stuff, it's not that we're counting down to zero. And that's kind of the assumption, because usually we have some progression in COPD. So 1 year, I can use an example I can use a couple of examples. 1 year you might test out at 25%, and then the next year you test out at 23%, and then the next year maybe you test out at 18%. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm getting awfully close to zero. It's like a reverse mountain climber on Price is Right. I guess I'm counting down to zero, and when it's zero, I'm done. That's probably not going to happen. That's not really how it works. And again, you can have oscillations. 1 year you might test at 25%, and the next year you might test at 30%, because maybe it was a nicer day, or you were feeling better, or you've done pulmonary rehab and you've strengthened up your musculature, or any one of a dozen different reasons. So yeah, that hopefully that answers Kim's question a little bit. I got a couple other things that was kind of long-winded, but wanted to touch base with Shar again. Missed yesterday, had an exacerbation going on. Not worried because it's mild. Slept all day yesterday. Hope you're feeling better today. Sometimes it's real tricky to figure out when it's a bad breathing day, when it's an exacerbation. If you're worse, then if it's worse for longer than like 36 hours, that's when I start getting worried about folks and encouraging them to call in and things like that. But hopefully a 1-day deal. Maybe it was just a bad breathing day. So let's see. All right, well, I don't want to all right. Well, thank you, Cindy, for checking in with that. And we'll keep that. I will touch base with you on that one after the show here. Glad, and Shar, definitely feeling better. Good to hear. John, honestly, I'm a Bob Barker guy. I grew up with Bob Barker. I have nothing against Drew Carey. I always thought he was hilarious as a stand-up comedian. Enjoyed his sitcom for a while. Haven't watched it as much, so maybe I just need to give him more of a chance. But I think we had this conversation maybe last week. I think Emma was down here because we were talking about Bob Barker and Rod Roddy, and I think actually the original announcer was I think you saved me with the original announcer of Price is Right, or at least an earlier announcer of Price is Right, because I think Price is Right had some announcer or some hosts even before Bob Barker, didn't they? I want to say was Wink Martindale a host? I don't think Wink Martindale was a host. Probably going to really embarrass myself with knowledge of 80s game show hosts, but the guy from Blockbusters, Bob Cullen. What I want to say Bob Cullen was a host of Price is Right for a minute. I don't know if that's true or not, but Michael, you so it looks like you're maybe watching the show from inside the group that I posted it in. If you click on the video, then that should join the main feed, and some comments are going there. I also have a watch party going on my personal page, so if you head over to the Mike Hess Facebook experience, you should be able to see my watch party there. So just trying to, it's tricky sometimes. Just I probably should try to simplify it a little bit, because I'm not seeing your comments coming out. And also you're commenting in the group instead of on the video. So again, Facebook doesn't always make it easier. What I should do is just push everybody over to YouTube, so we're all watching the the same feed and all that stuff. But not everybody knows how to use YouTube. Not everybody wants to use YouTube, just like not everybody wants to use Facebook. So I try to get it out to the widest possible audience I can on the most variety of sources. We're actually on Twitch, the video game streaming service, and we are on, what's the other one that we're on? Is called Mob Crush, which I believe is another video game streaming thing. Tried to do a Reddit feed at one point. That didn't quite work out, but trying to get, like I said, as many access to as many people as possible, and that's why I very much encourage and ask and hope and beg, borrow, steal. There he is. Share our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, subscribe, click the bell for notifications when we're going live, all that stuff. If I can get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, what should I do? Shave my head or something like that? Maybe if I get to 1,000 subscribers, maybe I'll just be crazy enough to do like a half marathon with Russell or something like that. Never been any kind of runner. I think I've done. Well, I've only ever like run 5Ks. Walked a 10K. I don't know if we formally did a 10K. We've got a 10K walking path, so I did that. I've done that a couple of times. That's really about the farthest distance I've gone. But I'd be willing to do something fun, ridiculous, cool, meaningful if we get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That'd be great. Welcome in, Michael, on the main feed now. And John, not watching it much anymore. Bob was the best. Absolutely. And be sure to spay and neuter your pets. Also enjoyed his cameo in Happy Gilmore. If we've got any lowbrow 90s comedy fans in the audience today. I believe it was Johnny Olsen and then Rod Roddy. That sounds correct. That sounds correct. Although I'll tell you, for my money, I love Bob Barker. For my money, best game show host has to be Richard Dawson, right? I mean, how can you not love Richard Dawson? I mean, he'd get fired in 15 minutes these days, of course, but, different era. But just his reaction to folks, I absolutely loved Richard Dawson on Family Feud, on Match Game. One of the greatest. Again, we're in 80s mode right now, and I'm sorry for reminiscing too much here. I'll get back to trying to be official clinician teacher guy in a minute here. 80s movie bad guy. Any Schwarzenegger fans out there? Running Man. Is he not just the best, sleaziest, but still that charisma just comes through? Richard Dawson, he was the best. All right. So, while we've got waiting on more questions coming through, I'll put my official clinician guy hat back on here and show everybody just a taste of what you were missing on Monday night in our virtual harmonicas class. I don't know if this was one technically that we did on that show, but this is a sampling of the high quality original content you will only get from COPD Navigator. What we do is those folks who bring in a harmonica or just want to watch, we teach you how to the very basics of how to play the thing. Let's see, which side of my face is that going to look better on? We'll put it over there. And then we play. Learned how to bend this week. Learned how to do a bend. Harmonicas are great. You know, they give you a little bit of resistance in there. They help you do a little bit of mindful breathing. They help you focus on your breath. And we all have a lot of fun, even on the webcam microphones and everything else. So that is what we're going to be doing that on Mondays going forward, I think. I don't see any reason we can't, especially through the summer here. Don't have to worry about school nights too much for the kiddos, although I've got two of them, well, one graduated, well, two graduated, I should say. One graduated, one's about to graduate. He may end up helping me out a little bit. He is insistent upon the gap year, which is probably not a bad idea. All things considered. Still got one going into high school. He's not even a middle schooler anymore. Little Joe, the ladder man, who some of you have met, he is going to high school this fall. Thank you, Jeannie. Nicely done, bend and all. Yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with the bends now. I don't know. Took a long time to figure out even what it was, and then even interpret how, because I was reading the instructions on what it was, and then I kind of accidentally did it. Well, Kim, I mean, I ended up doing it on accident, and then that kind of, it's this weird, the jaw motion, and this is I did this on the live, and this really got a kick out of everybody. I don't know. Let's see. Can I get a better view with the? That's not really a different view, so we'll stick with the good camera. But you kind of move your jaw a little bit, and then when your jaw moves, your tongue moves, and then that kind of redirects the sound. So it's kind of a. Like I said, I did it on accident, and then I figured it out. Peter Marshall was awesome too. I never saw Peter Marshall on Hollywood Squares. Who was most of my experience with Hollywood Squares is in the 80s with John Davidson, and then Joan Rivers in the center square and all that stuff. Although I do go back and I've caught some clips on YouTube of the really old Hollywood Squares with the real flamboyant guy in the center square. So Shar asks, back to teacher hat back on. I should have brought a hat down here. I had a hat on. Should have brought it back down here. I don't have a hat. Waiting on, got a hat coming from Russell, COPD athlete, but I don't have a hat right now. Shar says, when I did a spirometry test, why would one pass out after? Well, that's a good question. That's not terribly uncommon. Passing out is a little bit extreme, but when you're moving that much air and changing that much pressure inside of your chest, it does some weird stuff with air and with blood flow. It's easy to forget that, for example, your blood vessels they're not like a straw or they're not like PVC pipe, they're like plumbing. They flexible, they're squish, and they do all that stuff. And so when you're bearing down, you're really increasing this pressure inside of your chest. And sometimes that can actually stop some of the blood flow from your heart getting up into your lungs. Paul Lynn, thank you, Elena. Yes, Paul Lynn and John and Elena on the same page right there. So when you have that pressure and you have that interruption of blood flow out, up your neck and into your brain, then you kind of have a gray out, brown out, blackout kind of situation. So if you're doing it a lot and you're already having issues and you're short of breath and you're tired and you've got those blood flow problems, it is in fact really easy to, like I said, have that kind of gray out or blackout even situation. That's why a lot of times, people will get kind of lightheaded and woozy and stuff like that. And that's why for adults, we usually have you sit down. Sometimes the kiddos can still stand up because they don't tend to blow maybe as hard, I guess. I don't do a lot of peds spirometry, so I would defer that to our peds RT. But for my money, I always have somebody sit down, plant your feet on the floor so you can put your best effort forward and you don't fall over if you do start to slump out a little bit. So that's why sometimes you pass out. All right, what else we got? Let me, while we're waiting on the next batch of questions here, and again, thank you to John and Elena for reminding me of Paul Lind. He was indeed hilarious. Was. Okay, yeah. Let's see. COPD news. What's new in the world of COPD news, if anything? Get the harmonica. The microphone back to where it should be. Okay, let's see. So it looks like we're kind of back to, we had a kind of a burst of new information within the last couple of days. Well, that's a republish of something from May. And then now it looks like we're kind of getting back to, I was hoping we were maybe out of an embargo period again outside of the American Thoracic Society meeting, or when it would have been. So here's an interesting article, or at least an interesting headline. U.S. News and World Report. Pulmonary rehab can help people with COPD. So why do so few get it? By a Health Day reporter. All right, so we've got roughly 16 million people have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, et cetera, but Dr. David Menino, who does a lot with the COPD Foundation and is a tremendous COPD advocate. So this is actually a new study that was just released. This is one that I don't think I have seen yet, from the Journal of the American Medical Association, which is JAMA, which is one of our frontline journals. Linda, yes, we are live here. Pulmonary rehab can help after a hospital stay. Teaches patients to exercise, eat well, and use medications appropriately, and foster socialization, as COPD patients often feel isolated. So that's why we're trying to do house call and ready room and all these things. We want to make sure that we are social from a distance and not as isolated. Arguably nothing, no substitute for the real thing, but this is pretty good. And you don't have to leave your house and pack up your oxygen and bags and stuff. So they looked at a team from the University of Massachusetts, studied data from almost 200,000 Medicare patients hospitalized for COPD in 2014. So this, on top of everything else, this tells you how slow medical research can go here sometimes. This team looked at hospitalization data from 2014. I know it seems like this year has lasted like 3 years in and of itself, but even if we exclude that, that's 6 years ago. And now it's just now getting published. So 6 years ago, of that group, only 1.5% of patients began pulmonary rehab within 90 days of leaving the hospital. And Michael brings up a very good point. PR reimbursement will not sustain financial goals in most hospitals. Many have closed. I work in one, but it's at a critical access hospital. That is an excellent point. And that is, frankly, as I understand it, largely our fault as clinicians, with also a heavy dose of the government being the government. There were a lot, and again, my understanding of some of this is a little bit cursory. I wasn't really involved in a lot of the pulmonary rehab stuff at the time, although I remember reading about it through our professional organization. They changed some of the reporting requirements, that like the time intervals, and then that wasn't communicated very well, and so a lot of the hospitals or the facilities didn't do accurate reporting. And so all of a sudden it was like, well, we're like, according to the data, because it wasn't being reported properly, all of a sudden it was like, well, we're overpaying you like 400%. So now we're going to cut your reimbursement. And turns out that it was really just a communication problem, but then it was like, well, too bad. And we've been fighting to get back ever since. So a very good point about reimbursement. Hopefully that will change. That may be, I hesitate to use the word silver lining, but that may be something positive that comes out of the COVID crisis. You know, we know a lot of folks have been having a lot of trouble with post ICU conditions and things like that. There has been talk that pulmonary rehab can help a lot of those folks too. And, you know, frankly, it's several years on now. We've got some virtual options out there. Home Rehab Network is out there. I look like John Linnell. I thank you for that. I'll take it. So, what was I saying? Oh, pulmonary rehab. Hopefully, we can maybe get some sense, you know, in some aspects, the COVID crisis has brought some attention to breathing problems in general, not specifically other states, you know, not COPD, not asthma, not CF, but maybe we're starting to get people to think about how important the lungs are after all. Anyway, getting back to this study, of the group, 1.5%, about 2,700 patients had began pulmonary rehab within 90 days. But the biggest finding here is that within a year of discharge after that first admission, only 7% of patients who had began rehab died, but almost 20% of the group who did not have rehab within 90 days passed. So, I mean, as Dr. Menino said, if this were a medication, it would be a blockbuster. I mean, yeah, that's like a third, you know, that's like a 66% reduction. But, you know, as Michael points out, the rehab or reimbursement is an issue. Dr. Carolyn Rochester is also in this article examining the reasons why, and says that doctors are not incentivized to discuss or refer patients to rehab, and even when they do, many don't follow through because they don't know the potential benefits or they lack access. So, two things to unpack there. Many doctors are not incentivized to discuss or refer patients. So, incentivized is a tricky word because it kind of implies that if pulmonary rehabs were able to pay doctors to do referrals, then that would be better. And then that runs afoul of some other, that could potentially run afoul of some other like self-dealing laws and things like that. Particular when we, you know, if you have a primary care or your primary doc works for the same hospital system as the pulmonary rehab facility, and you know, it gets complicated when we say incentivized. But more practically speaking, you know, it comes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show, where if the options I have are I can actively give you an inhaler and tell you to use it, or I can say, hey, go to this place and do the stuff, I'm probably going to give you the inhaler just because it's more of an active process, and that's how cognitive bias works. We're internally incentivized to actively do a thing, rather than say, well, go over here and do, you know, go over here and listen to them. So that's kind of what I look at as incentivized. And then the next thing is, even when they do, many don't follow through because they don't know the potential benefits or lack access. And again, I don't know that I entirely agree with the idea that they don't know potential benefits. While there are definitely still a lot of misunderstandings about COPD, providers in general know that exercise is generally a good thing. And I don't think it's valid to say that, well, yeah, I don't know that I intentionally agree with that. Although I do wholeheartedly agree with lacking access, because the next thing that this Dr. Rochester points out is the programs are not widely available and are severely underfunded. You know, it's been kind of a thing here. And then they go on to talk a bit about the Dorney-Koppel Family Charitable Foundation provides startup funding for pulmonary rehab clinics in common areas. And all the kudos to Ted and Grace Ann Dorney-Koppel, or I should probably be more accurate to say Grace Ann Dorney-Koppel and Ted, because she is a driving force behind COPD awareness and some additional pulmonary rehab facilities. She says, with the world's attention on COVID-19, Dorney Koppel said her focus is on COPD patients who are highly affected by the disease. That includes the many individuals who may not even know they have COPD, which leaves them vulnerable to contracting the virus. So, yes, absolutely. Interesting article. Good study. Hopefully we can get some more awareness. Michael, please explain virtual rehab facility or virtual rehab opportunities for patients. How is it supported financially? Is the program following AAC VPR guidelines? Some of them are, just like a lot of in-person, for those who don't know, the AAC VPR is the American Association for Cardiovascular and Pulmonary Rehab, and is basically the accrediting body for pulmonary rehab facilities. However, it's not necessary to get that endorsement, that certification. I can't remember if they call it a certification or Center for Excellence or whatever they do. It's not mandatory to have that in order to run a facility. It's not like, having your hospital accredited or your provider's office accredited. So there are a lot, and of course it's expensive to do that, not to get the thing, but to follow those guidelines costs more than to not follow the guidelines. So there are a lot of places that forego that. As far as how the places work, there are a couple of different models. The two that I'm even passingly familiar with are Home Rehab Network, which is out of maybe Boston, somewhere in New England, and Lift Pulmonary. They just changed their name. It was Lift Pulmonary Rehab. Now they call it Lift something else. Where it's not, I'm trying to remember. They are Lift is a subscription service. So that's a thing that you have to pay for, and then that's how they get their financial support. Most of it anyway. I don't know if they have any other like industrial support or anything like that. Home Rehab Network, I believe they're able to do some reimbursements somehow. I know it's been a little bit since I've talked with Alex, but the biggest takeaway I remember from them is that he said that they have some kind of arrangement with Medicare, where a lot of folks who are on Medicare are able to get a reduced copay or something along those lines. That may also be, I'm going to see if let me pull up their webpage again real quick. Home Rehab Network. Like I said, it's been a minute since I've talked to them, but let's see our programs. Telerehabilitation, we got schedule an appointment. So it does look like this may also be a subscription service. Well, there's a lot of medical equipment at least. Overnight pulse ox. So I believe they get, it's one of those deals where you get kind of the first one's free. You get the first appointment, virtual appointment online. And then they offer some other stuff. Because I keep getting pop-ups about somebody has just purchased, this one says dietary consultation. Somebody else just purchased physical therapy. I don't know how accurate that is, but interestingly enough, they also have a couple of other in their shop here. You can get an exercise bike, you can get the breather, you can get a pulse ox, O2 safety strap. That's good to see. Sam checks in from time to time. Hand and foot pedal bike. There, somebody just purchased telerehabilitation. So I don't know how exactly FAQs. Here we go. That might tell us. They are approved through Medicare, they say. Full pulmonary and cardiac rehabilitation from your home. Each program provides respiratory therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, blah, blah, blah. In our therapy programs, you see the practitioner. They can see you all from your phone, TV, computer, or tablet. So you do the kind of remote patient monitoring thing. You do a little bit of training. It looks like you're expected to have some kind of equipment, or you can purchase some through their stuff. And they say they're approved through Medicare. So I was just getting to know them a little bit more, and then all of the COVID stuff kind of hit, and I haven't really been able to follow up a lot with them, but it's an intriguing program, and I'll tell you, they're very passionate people. I can tell you that much. Shar says, lucky to live in Canada. My pulmonary rehab was fully paid, just paid $70 for the parking fees. That's not cheap for parking. Jeez. But yeah, I mean, it's, no system is perfect, and I know we've had conversations in the group and with other places that there are always trade-offs. There are some things that are good about the Canadian system, some things that are not so good, some things that are good about. We've even had Andy checks in from time to time. Andy Barker talks a lot about the English, the National Health System over in the UK. They've got some good stuff. They've got some bad stuff. We've got some good stuff. We've got some bad stuff. My personal bias is that more of our stuff is bad, but mostly kind of an access thing and a prioritization thing. We'd rather pay for the back end of stuff and try to fix somebody than to try to do any of the prevention or maintenance care. But that's a whole other soapbox. And there's perfectly valid reasons for a lot of the stuff. So we can, and well, I shouldn't say perfectly valid reasons. Perfectly valid or perfectly reasonable people can differ on their opinions, and that's okay. And that's something that we have somewhat gotten away from, unfortunately, these days. So let's see. Just got. Okay. All right, so we are coming up at the top of the hour here. It is 5 o'clock on the East Coast, Eastern time zone. No, it's not, but how can I complain? They're twice a week for 8 weeks. So yeah, that's very similar to U.S. Pulmonary rehab. Oftentimes we'll have people go 3 times a week, but I mean, there are different types of programs. 2 to 3 times a week for 8 to 12 weeks. Those are probably the most common ranges I see these days. The downside is, we've got the copays and deductibles and all that stuff. So like I said, I don't know. But yeah, we're at the top of the hour. Give you a couple of minutes for any last minute questions. Thank you, Linda. And thank you to John for bringing Linda to us. I see that you've already liked our Facebook page, so I really appreciate that. If anybody else is not liked the Facebook page, I encourage you to do that. Just posted a link. As a matter of fact, I'm going to see if I can. I should do it on this computer. See if I can drop a link to. There was just a study opportunity posted. I believe it's live now. That I got from the Efforts group. That does a lot for patient awareness and advocacy and all that stuff. New research opportunity. I believe this one does involve an Amazon gift card. It's waiting for the page to load here. Your screen has not frozen for a change, hopefully. Just as soon as I can pull that up here. Come on, scroll farther. I just want to drop it into the comments so that it's easy for everybody to see. Here we go. I'll get that copied. Whoops, that pasted it. That's not what I wanted to do. So this is for... I don't know this company exactly, but I vouch for the sources. Please fill out the following preliminary questions below. If you qualify, we'll follow up with you to discuss details and scheduling. If you do not qualify, we'll email you at the end of the project, thanking you for your time. So this is, again, a good opportunity to get some research going for the COPD community. I am not affiliated with this company. I'll point that out there. So I get nothing if you click on the thing, but you may help the COPD community. And that is really what matters at the end of the day. So check out that link. And yeah, that's that. Hopefully, I will see some of you back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time for the penultimate COPD Navigator house call. For now, someday we'll be back live every day. I just got to go buy my lottery tickets. Really appreciate everybody spending some of your Wednesday with us today. Hopefully you're having a great day. Hopefully you're taking care of yourselves and continue to take care of each other. Even more important now than ever. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow at 4 for house call, and we'll be back at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, hopefully, to do some game time. We've got some mind games, brain games, clever. Nothing real invasive or anything like that, but coming up with punchlines to jokes and that sort of thing. I have a little bit of fun with it. See if it works and see if it's worth continuing on. Until then, my name is Mike Hess by Joe. I am the COPD dude. This has been COPD Navigator House Call, and I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday. Take care, everybody.